Mental health professionals of Reddit, what is the saddest case of wow this person really fucked up because of how they were treated during their childhood you have ever come across? I've been working at a mental health facility for about 30 years now, and I once was counseling a man who was held down and tickled for minutes upon minutes. The man now has a paranoia of tank tops and shorts because he believes it leaves him vulnerable. This actually freaks me out more than it should. I loathe being tickled. It's weird that the Asterix books have the Romans tickle people as a funny way of showing torture. My ex would do this to me fairly regularly and would only stop after I was hyperventilating, crying and having a full panic attack. He was 6'7" and could easily hold both my wrists with one hand. Honestly, it's making me feel short of breath and panicky just thinking about it, and it was over 5 years ago. It's such an odd thing to think of tickling as abuse, but it really can be. I work with the homeless population. I would say over half the clients I work with have childhood trauma. The drugs, alcohol and mental illness in this population is incredibly high, but the common denominator is more often than not childhood abuse neglect. There is an incredible level of loneliness and hopelessness that many of my clients experience, and many of them are haunted by their past or still living in it. A teacher mentor of mine who worked with a similar demographic taught me this one 9 times out of 10. Drug use is the symptom, not the cause. It's a healthcare problem, not a criminal one. But criminalizing it is more profitable than treating it, so round the cycle we go again. When people don't have love, warmth, or safety at home, they start looking elsewhere for it. A lot of the time they think they find it in drugs. It seems to me like most addicts are mentally ill, and I think most of the time it precedes drug abuse. We really need to stop locking them up and just treat them like people and get them the help they need. A word. So many parents seem to think their divorce doesn't affect their kids. Can't go into specifics, but one kid ended up with conversion disorder because their parents' divorce was so horrendous. Parents, don't drag your kids into your mess. Keep it civil. Don't let kids witness the nasty, drawn out stuff. They are not pawns in your chess battle with your ex. They are your children, and you will give them lifelong issues if you treat them as points to be won. What's conversion disorder? When a victim suffers neurological symptoms like blindness or paralysis that don't have any other medical explanation. Its earliest official documentation that I know of was in WWI, shell shock. Soldiers would go deaf, blind, be unable to walk normally, etc. with no actual physical harm. They convert their trauma into physical afflictions because their mind cannot handle the trauma. Mind y'all, I'm like actually not having a good time. Mind y'all, this is too much for me. I gotta go legs, we don't know how to work without you though. See? An individual whose mother threw acid on her. Scars all over her body from it. And that was only the tip of the abuse iceberg this client had to deal with. Read abuse iceberg as iceberg lettuce. I think my brain has had enough, and it's going into protection mode. You should check out the documentary Child of Rage about Beth Thomas, who had severe behavioral problems as a result of being sexually abused as a very young child. It's only about 30 minutes, but it's fascinating and deeply tragic. The way this child so nonchalantly talks about her violent acts and feelings is chilling. However, I have heard that after years of therapy she managed to end up a normal adult, so there is a bit of a happy ending. But the way she talks seems very adult and uses psychological terms, like she describes things not from her point of view. Kids who are abused are great at mimicking adult behavior to survive. My doctor calls that narrative coping. It's easier to dissociate from the feelings surrounding the events when you're just talking about them, as though you're a news reporter. I will never forget that documentary, ever. Just watch this documentary. It was deeply sad to watch, but like you say, fascinating. Thanks for sharing this. Also, great to hear she managed to change her life and become a normal adult. Her parents are wonderful for never giving up on her. I'm a therapist, community mental health in one of the poorest cities in my state. Specifics are not allowed, but the biggest issue I see are parents not realizing that having children means much sacrifice. Lots of parents I work with view their children as friends. These parents continue their social lifestyle without understanding the impact on their children. I personally have 3 kids. My fun ended years ago. My focus is now on the humans I had a part of bringing into this world and the responsibility that comes with it. And yes, I have a great time with my kids. It's now a part of my job to get other parents to see their role as teachers and not partying it up every night. You are totally right, and that's why I don't want children ever. I am too egoist and love myself much more than the next person to sacrifice myself like this. Me too, exactly. I do recognize the sacrifice. I have an excellent and devoted mother who enjoys parenthood, and I'm not having any of it. Also, I'm female, so X5000 of course in the sacrifice department. But that's the difference between you and all the bad parents out there. You realize that you don't want to make that sacrifice, and so you just don't have kids. Others feel like they want to be parents and just don't put in the effort. Looked after a 14-year-old. She was in hospital for her 15th birthday. Multiple suicide attempts. I'm talking 20 plus. On her birthday she wanted to call her mum, a letter, but had to listen in standard procedure. Her mum didn't say happy birthday, but asked what she wanted, telling her she'd buy anything she wanted. Daughter said she just wanted to see her. Mum said she couldn't do that, but she'd send presents. This girl was the daughter of 2 successful, very wealthy lawyers. All she wanted was to spend time with them, but they thought they could just throw money at her until she was better. Money can't buy happiness. It's been a few years now, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's had a completed attempt by now. It's so sad how resigned your last sentence is. You look after people you feel are gonna make it, and you look after people you feel, no matter what you or anyone else does, won't. I'm a security guard on a psych unit. I once had a patient refuse her medicine, which is a fairly common occurrence. Normally, that's fine. The doctor will convince them to take their meds the next day. However, this girl was extremely psychotic. In some cases, we have to hold patients down for a shot. As soon as we walked in the room, this girl started screaming, "Daddy, please don't. I promise I'll stop. No, I'll be good." She got the shot and just curled up and started bawling. This was the saddest forced shot we've ever had to give, and all of us left the room completely silent. I've been scrolling for like 20 minutes in tears reading these stories, but this one knocked the wind out of me. Poor girl. Not a mental health professional. One of my best friends got mixed up with the wrong people and ended up becoming a major drug addict and OD'd right before her 30th, leaving behind 2 kids she loved dearly. Poor girl was beyond naturally smart and witty, but couldn't work out the issues from growing up. She had a handful of siblings and lived in a very Christian-based nuclear family. She was the youngest and made scapegoat for everything. I never saw any physical abuse, but none of the family had a problem tearing into her. I remember thinking my house was bad to live in, but I was super grateful I wasn't in my friend's shoes. She never could find her sense of self-worth. It tears me up that none of us could help her. Did they continue talking badly about her after her death, or did they do an about face and how she was just the most wonderful daughter who had the most wonderful life family who didn't deserve this? I hope her children are not in contact with her parents. Wouldn't be surprised if they continued their behavior on the next generation. They were in deep denial, but at least they were talking super wonderfully about her when I saw them at the wake. Unfortunately, the kids were pretty small, so they definitely got absorbed into that mess. IDK, what's going on currently? Prenatal exposure to alcohol and or drugs. Born premature head injury as a baby due to parental neglect. This person was not even 6 months old and the future was so grim. So many. I've seen a number of men who were pimped out by their parents for drugs as young boys, and now, unsurprisingly, are violent and also struggle with addiction. So incredibly sad. I see a lot of young people that come from really rough neighborhoods. One or both parents in and out of prison. Gang involvement. A lot of them have lost family members to gun violence. I ask every person about trauma in my assessment and a lot of them deny, because to them it's not trauma. It's normal. It's all they know. Just so sad. We see a lot of refugees from Iraq, Sudan, etc. The violence some of them have suffered is inhuman. Sometimes it makes me want to go home and want to crawl under the bed in the fetal position and cry. 15-year-old tried to commit suicide after being found guilty of molesting his 7-year-old sister for 2 years. Come to find out his dad had been sexually abusing him for nearly his entire childhood ages 1 to 12 until his dad committed suicide and blamed his son in his suicide note for ratting him out. More than once I have met someone who was sold by a parent for drugs. You can genuinely feel your heart break when you hear that out loud. Not a mental health professional, but someone seeing one. I never realized how deeply ingrained my self-doubts were, and that a lot of it was because of my childhood. I feel like I'm not allowed to, nor deserve to succeed. That I shouldn't be loved. That nothing I do is right. That I'm a failure. That I can't belong. These are all things I have in my head that I'm struggling to work through. Factually speaking, they are all untrue. I know this in my head. But emotionally I feel them all the time. Every time I do anything I think, this isn't going to work, be good enough. Why am I even trying? I may not be a serial killer, but there is a lot of daily struggle and I have so many doubts and fears it is outright crippling at times. I know this will be buried, but thank you to mental health professionals, you saved my life. Had to spend the longest week of my life in a suicide-proof cell. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced, but that was because of the self-reflection. You are saints, and you deserve far more recognition for the work you do. I'm sorry to the police, EMTs, and nurses that had to deal with me, and yet you helped me get to where I can at least just be. Thank you.